In the novel The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, aliens from Mars attacked Earth because their home planet was dying. Armed with death rays and giant walking machines, the extraterrestrials quickly burned various cities and nearly captured the largest capitals on Earth. The Martians easily suppressed all attempts at resistance, and our civilization was on the brink of turning to ruins when the invasion suddenly ceased. Despite their advanced science and powerful weapons, the aliens overlooked one danger. They did not anticipate an attack from the most primitive earthly beings, microbes. This novel spawned an entire literary genre and thousands of films, such as Earth versus the Flying Saucers and Independence Day. However, most scientists grimace at how aliens are portrayed in these works. Films typically feature beings with human-like values and emotions. Even if they have green skin and enormous heads, they still bear a certain resemblance to us. Moreover, they generally speak English fluently. But, as many scientists point out, it is quite possible that we have more in common with a lobster or a sea cucumber than with an alien from outer space. Just as with silicon-based consciousness, extraterrestrial consciousness is likely to possess the same general traits described by our space-time theory, namely, the ability to model the surrounding world and then calculate how it will develop over time to achieve a specific goal. However, while robots can be programmed to be emotionally connected to humans and pursue goals compatible with ours, extraterrestrial intelligence may be more complex. It may not possess either of these traits. Most likely, another civilization will have its own set of values and goals that do not align with human ones. We can only speculate about what those might be. The consultant for the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, was physicist Dr. Freeman Dyson from the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study. After watching the entire film, he was pleased not only with the brilliant special effects, but also with the fact that, for the first time in a Hollywood film, an alien intelligence was presented with desires, goals, and intentions that were completely different from ours. For the first time, aliens in a film were not merely actors wearing monstrous costumes, desperately trying to portray a threat. No, the alien intelligence was depicted here as something perpendicular to the human experience, something entirely foreign. In 2011, Stephen Hawking raised another question. The renowned cosmologist made headlines by stating that we should be prepared for a possible alien invasion. He said that if we are destined to encounter an extraterrestrial civilization someday, it will be more advanced and therefore pose a deadly threat to our existence. Just recalling what happened to the Aztecs after their encounter with the bloodthirsty Cortez and his conquistadors gives us an idea of what might await earthly civilization after such a fateful meeting. In 1521, a handful of cutthroats armed with technologies, iron swords, gunpowder, and horses, which the Aztecs, living in the Bronze Age, could not even imagine, destroyed the ancient Aztec civilization in just a few months. All this raises some questions. What does extraterrestrial intelligence consist of? How might the thought processes and goals of aliens differ from ours? What do they want? These questions are far from academic. Given the remarkable achievements of astrophysicists, we may well encounter representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization in the coming decades. How we react to such an encounter could significantly determine the future of humanity, and the encounter itself could become one of the most significant turning points in the history of civilization. Several recent achievements bring this historic day closer. First, in 2011, the scientific apparatus Kepler provided astronomers with reliable data about planets in our galaxy for the first time in history. Kepler analyzed the light from thousands of stars in a selected area of the sky. It turned out that around every 200th star, there could be an Earth-like planet situated in a habitable zone. Thus, we were able to estimate for the first time the number of stars in the galaxy that might have terrestrial-type planets, around 1 billion. Looking at distant stars, we have every reason to think that someone might be looking back at us at this very moment. To date, more than 1,000 exoplanets have been studied using ground-based telescopes, with astronomers discovering them at a rate of about 2 per week. Unfortunately, almost all of them belong to the group of giant planets, likely devoid of any life resembling earthly life. There are, however, a few super-Earths, rocky planets several times larger than Earth, and Kepler has already identified around 2.5 exoplanet candidates in its search zone, some of which are very similar to Earth. These planets orbit their suns at a distance that allows for the existence of liquid oceans, and liquid water is the universal solvent in which most organic substances, like DNA and proteins, dissolve. In 2013, NASA scientists announced the most impressive discovery by Kepler. 2 exoplanets that can be considered almost twins of Earth are located 1,200 light-years away in the constellation Lyra. They are only 60 and 40% larger than Earth, and more importantly, lie within the habitable zone of their stars. It is possible that they have liquid oceans. Of all the previously studied planets, they are the most suitable candidates for being Earth-like. The Hubble Space Telescope has provided us with an estimate of the total number of galaxies in the visible universe, 100 billion. Accordingly, we can calculate the number of Earth-like planets in the visible universe, 1 billion times 100 billion, or 100 quintillion Earth-like planets. This is truly an astronomical number. Therefore, the probability of life existing in the universe is astronomically high, especially considering that the universe is nearly 14 billion years old, providing ample time for the development and possibly the fall of intelligent empires. In fact, it would be a miracle if there were no other advanced civilizations in the universe. The design of radio telescopes continues to evolve and become more complex. Only about 1,000 star systems have been examined for the presence of intelligent life, but in the coming decades, that number could increase a millionfold. The use of radio telescopes to search for extraterrestrial civilizations began in the 1960s. At that time, astronomer Frank Drake initiated Project Ozma, named after the Queen of the Land of Oz, using a 25-meter radio telescope in Green Bank, West Virginia. Thus, the SETI project, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, was born. Unfortunately, no signals from aliens were detected, but in 1971, NASA proposed Project Cyclops, which envisioned the construction of 1,500 radio telescopes at a total cost of $10 billion. It is no surprise that this project did not gain traction in Congress. The idea was not well received, and funds were allocated to a much more modest project, sending a carefully crafted and encoded message to aliens in 1971. A coded message of 1,679 bits was sent by the giant Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico towards the globular cluster M13, which is 25,000 light-years away from us. This was the first cosmic business card of our civilization, containing important information about the human race. However, no response was received. Perhaps we did not appeal to the aliens, or maybe the speed of light was a hindrance. Given the distance, it is unlikely we should expect a response before another 52,000 years. Since then, some scientists have expressed doubts about whether it is wise to so openly advertise our existence to the cosmos, at least until we determine the intentions of extraterrestrial beings towards us. These individuals disagree with proponents of SETI projects, who actively advocate sending signals to extraterrestrial civilizations. Supporters of the project argue that we are already sending a vast amount of radio and television signals into space, so a few additional substantive signals from the project would not make much difference. However, critics of the project believe we should not unnecessarily increase the chances of being detected by potentially hostile aliens. In 1995, astronomers turned to private sponsors and established the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, to centralize research and initiate Project Phoenix, aimed at studying 1,000 nearby sun-like stars. The equipment used is so sensitive that it could pick up signals from airport radar systems 200 light-years away. Since its founding, the SETI Institute has operated on a budget of $5 million per year and has scanned more than 1,000 stars, but to date, there have been no results. Another example of an innovative approach is the SETI Home Project, initiated in 1999 by astronomers at the University of California, Berkeley. It involves an army of millions of amateur astronomers who own personal computers. Anyone can participate in this historic hunt. While you sleep at night, your screensaver quietly processes data received from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. So far, 5,200,000 people from 234 countries have signed up to participate in the project. Perhaps they dream of being the first in human history to make contact with extraterrestrial life, and their names, like that of Columbus, will go down in history. The SETI Home Project has grown so rapidly that it is now the largest project of its kind ever undertaken. During a conversation with then-director of SETI Home, Dr. Dean Vinthemer, he mentioned that sometimes they intentionally feed the system data from radio telescopes with false signals from imaginary extraterrestrial civilizations. If no participants detect these false signals, it will become clear that something is wrong with the program. So keep in mind, if your screensaver announces that it has decoded a message from an extraterrestrial civilization, do not rush to call the police or the President of the United States. It might just be a false message. One of my colleagues dedicated his life to the search for intelligent life in space. I had expected that with his PhD in physics, he would become a respected professor and lecture graduate students. But instead, he spends his time quite differently, soliciting donations from wealthy individuals for the SETI Institute, scanning for potential messages from space, and hosting a radio show. I once asked him if his fellow scientists ever mocked him when he said he was listening for alien signals from space. He replied that they no longer do. New discoveries in astronomy have changed public opinion once again. Moreover, he confidently asserts that contact with an extraterrestrial civilization awaits us in the very near future. He even announced that the Allen Telescope Array, currently under construction, which includes 350 antennas, will detect a signal in 2025. Isn't it risky to make such claims? I asked. What gives him such confidence? One factor in his favor is the explosive growth in recent years of the number of radio telescopes worldwide. The U.S. government does not fund the project, but the CD Institute now has a reliable source of funding. They managed to convince Paul Allen, a billionaire from Microsoft, to donate more than $30 million to begin construction in Creek, California, north of San Francisco. Currently, this array is scanning the sky using 42 radio telescopes, and over time, that number will increase to 350. Chronic underfunding of such scientific experiments remains a problem. To compensate for budget cuts, the Entry to Creek project is partially kept afloat with military support. Shostak confessed to me that the only thing that slightly bothers him is that people sometimes confuse the SETI project with a search for flying saucers. SETI, he asserts, is based on a solid foundation of physics and astronomy, utilizing the latest technological advancements, while the latter builds its theories on outright rumors that may or may not have a grain of truth. The issue is that many of the reports about flying saucers he constantly receives via email are typically impossible to verify or reproduce. He asks anyone who claims to have been abducted by aliens or to have been inside a flying saucer to bring back something, even a pen or a paperweight, as proof. Never leave a flying saucer empty-handed, he told me. He also believes that there is no reliable evidence of aliens visiting our planet. When I asked him if he thought the U.S. government was intentionally hiding information about encounters with extraterrestrials, as many conspiracy theorists believe, he replied, "Would they really be able to hide such events so effectively? Don't forget, this is also the government that runs our postal service." When I asked Dr. Robert Heimer why he is so confident in the existence of extraterrestrial life, he replied that the numbers work in his favor. Back in 1961, astronomer Frank Drake tried to estimate the number of intelligent civilizations using some plausible assumptions. If we start with 100 billion stars in the galaxy, we can estimate what fraction of them resemble the Sun in characteristics. We can further reduce this number by estimating the fraction of stars that have planets, and then the fraction of systems that have Earth-like planets, and so on. After many plausible assumptions, we arrive at an estimate of 10,000 advanced civilizations in our galaxy. Incidentally, Carl Sagan arrived at 1 million with different assumptions. Since then, scientists have been able to estimate the number of advanced civilizations in the galaxy much more accurately. We now know that the average number of planets per star is greater than originally assumed by Drake, and there are also more Earth-like planets. However, there remains one problem. Even if we can accurately say how many Earth twins exist in space, we still do not understand at what stage of their emergence intelligent life arises. Even on Earth, it took 4.5 billion years for intelligent beings to finally emerge. Life has existed on the planet for at least 3.5 billion years, but only in the last 100,000 years have intelligent beings like us appeared. So even on an Earth-like planet, particularly on Earth itself, the development of intelligent life is quite complex. If there are so many stars in the galaxy and so many extraterrestrial civilizations, why do they not visit Earth? This is known as the Fermi paradox, named after Nobel laureate Enrico Fermi, who participated in the creation of the atomic bomb. Many theories have been proposed regarding this issue. On one hand, the distances between stars may be too great for visits. Our most powerful chemical rockets would take about 70,000 years to reach the nearest stars to Earth. Perhaps a civilization millions of years ahead of us has solved this problem. But there is another possibility. They may have destroyed themselves in a nuclear war. As John Kennedy once said, "I am sorry," but in the joke that there is no life on other planets because their scientists have advanced further than ours, there is too much truth. However, the most logical possibility may be this. Imagine you are walking down a forest path and see an anthill. Would you knock on the ant's door and announce, "I have brought you some goodies. I have brought you beads. I will give you nuclear energy. I will create an ant paradise for you. Take me to your leader"? Probably not. Now imagine that workers are building an 8-lane highway next to the anthill. Will the ants understand the frequency at which the workers communicate with each other? Will they even comprehend what an 8-lane highway is? Similarly, any intelligent civilization that reaches Earth from the stars must, by definition, be thousands or even millions of years ahead of us, and we may have nothing to offer them. In other words, we are overestimating ourselves if we think that aliens will travel trillions of kilometers just to meet us. We are most likely simply not on their radar screens. Ironically, there may be a multitude of intelligent life forms in the galaxy, but we are so primitive that we do not notice anything. Let us assume for a moment that the moment has arrived. This will happen sooner or later, and we come into contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. This moment could become a turning point in human history. The next question is, what do we want from this contact, and what might extraterrestrial consciousness be like? In movies and science fiction novels, aliens often want to eat us, conquer us, engage in sexual relations with us, enslave us, or simply strip us of all valuable resources. However, all these options are highly unlikely. Our first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization will most likely begin with a flying saucer landing on the lawn in front of the White House. More likely, some teenager whose computer is running the SETI home screensaver will announce that his computer has decoded a signal from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Or perhaps the SETI project in Crete will receive a message showing signs of intelligence. Thus, our first encounter with aliens will be one-sided. We may overhear some intelligent message, but it may take decades before we send a response, let alone receive a reply. The conversations we hear on the radio may provide us with valuable information about this extraterrestrial civilization, but most of the communications will likely consist of gossip, entertainment, music, and other trivialities rather than scientific knowledge. I then asked Dr. Shostak the key question. When the first contact occurs, will you keep it a secret? After all, news of it could cause mass panic, religious hysteria, chaos, and uncontrollable flight. I was somewhat surprised when he replied, "No, they will pass all the data to the governments and peoples of the world." Then the next question, what will aliens look like? How do they think? To gain insight into the consciousness of an extraterrestrial being, it is useful to analyze another alien consciousness, animal consciousness. We live alongside them on the same planet, yet we have no idea what goes on in their minds. Understanding animal consciousness, in turn, may help us understand extraterrestrial consciousness. Do animals think? If they do, what do they think about? This question has puzzled the best minds of humanity for thousands of years. This famous question was discussed by Greek thinkers like Plutarch and Pliny, as well as other giants of philosophy, but it remains unresolved to this day. A dog runs down the road in search of its owner and encounters a fork where the road splits in three directions. First, it runs left, sniffs everything there, then returns, already knowing that its owner did not take that path. Then it runs right, sniffs, and realizes that the owner was not there either. But now, the dog confidently runs down the middle path, not sniffing anything. What was happening in the dog's mind during this process? The great philosopher, pondering this question in vain, French philosopher Michel de Montaigne, wrote that the dog is evidently capable of abstract thought. But Thomas Aquinas, in the 13th century, expressed the opposite opinion. What appears outwardly as abstract thinking is not necessarily so. We may be deceived by external similarities to rational reasoning, he argued. Several centuries later, another famous exchange of views on animal consciousness occurred between John Locke and George Berkeley. Animals do not think, Locke stated abstractly and unequivocally, to which Bishop Berkeley replied, if the fact that creatures do not think is an abstraction, making it a distinguishing feature of such animals, I fear that many who pass for human must be counted among their number. Throughout the ages, philosophers have attempted to analyze this question in the same way, applying the measure of human consciousness to dogs. This is a standard error of anthropomorphism, the approach that assumes animals think and behave like humans. But perhaps the real solution would be to look at this question from the dog's perspective, which may be entirely alien to us. I defined animals as part of a continuum of consciousness. They may differ from us in the parameters on which the model of the surrounding world is built. Dr. David Eggman notes that psychologists refer to this as Umwelt, the reality of perception of others. He points out that in the blind and deaf world of a tick, important signals are temperature and the scent of butyric acid. For a black-legged tick, it is electric fields. For a bat with its echolocation, it is compressed airwaves. Each organism inhabits its own Umwelt and likely believes that this is the entirety of objective reality outside. Imagine the brain of a dog that constantly lives in a whirlwind of various smells, which it uses to find food or seek a mate. From these smells, the dog then constructs a mental map of everything that exists around it. This map of smells is entirely different from the one we build using our eyes and carries a completely different set of information. Now picture the Penfield map of a dog's brain. A large portion would be dedicated to the nose. Different animals would yield different Penfield maps, and for extraterrestrials, it would likely look even stranger. Unfortunately, we tend to attribute human consciousness to animals, even though their worldview may be entirely different. For instance, if a dog faithfully follows its owner and obeys them, we subconsciously assume that the dog is man's best friend because it loves and respects us. However, since the dog is descended from the gray wolf, which hunts in packs and is accustomed to a strict hierarchical structure, it is more likely that the dog sees us as a kind of alpha male or pack leader. In some sense, you are the boss to it. This is likely one reason why training a puppy is much easier than training an adult dog. A puppy's brain easily retains the imprint of a person's presence, while more mature dogs understand that humans are not members of their pack. When a cat enters an unfamiliar room and immediately rushes to mark a beautiful rug, we assume it is angry or nervous and try to understand what upset it. But the cat may simply be marking its territory to deter other cats. So, the cat is not upset. It is warning other cats to stay away from this house because it belongs to it. If a cat purrs and rubs against its owner's legs, we think it is grateful for the care, and such behavior is a sign of warmth and affection. In reality, it is more likely rubbing its hormones on you, claiming its rights over you. Obviously, it aims to ward off other cats. From the cat's perspective, you are something like a servant, whose duty is to provide food several times a day, and by rubbing against you, it warns others that it already has a rightful owner. As the philosopher Michel de Montaigne wrote in the 16th century, "When I play with my cat, how do I know that it is not she who is playing with me, but I with her?" If a cat at some point leaves and tries to be alone, it is not necessarily a sign of anger or coldness. The domestic cat descends from the wild cat, which, unlike dogs, is a solitary hunter. Cats do not have a leader, an alpha male, to drool over, while dogs need that. The abundance of television shows about various animal whisperers likely reflects the problems humans face when trying to project their own consciousness and intentions onto animal consciousness. The consciousness of a bat is vastly different from both human and dog consciousness. It is dominated by sound. A bat is nearly blind and relies on the response to the high-pitched squeaks it emits. Echolocation helps it see insects, obstacles, and its fellow bats. The Penfield map of its brain would look very unusual to us, with a large portion dedicated to the ears. Similarly, dolphin consciousness is significantly different from human consciousness. It is also based on echolocation. The frontal cortex of a dolphin's brain is smaller than that of a human, leading to the belief that dolphin intelligence is lower than that of humans. However, dolphins compensate for the smaller size of their frontal cortex with a larger total brain mass. The neocortex of a dolphin's brain, when unfolded, would occupy 6 magazine pages, while that of a human would occupy only 4. Additionally, dolphins have highly developed occipital and temporal regions of the cortex. It is there that the analysis of echolocation signals in water occurs, and they are one of the few animals capable of recognizing themselves in a mirror. Perhaps this is why, in addition to what has been said, we note that the structure of a dolphin's brain differs from that of a human, as the ancestors of dolphins and humans diverged on the path of evolution around 95 million years ago. Dolphins do not need a nose, so their olfactory bulbs disappear shortly after birth. However, 30 million years ago, they experienced a dramatic increase in auditory cortex size. That was when dolphins learned to hunt for food using echolocation. Their world, like that of bats, is filled with swirling echoes and various vibrations. Compared to humans, dolphins have a slightly larger limbic system. This portion, known as the paralimbic area, likely helps dolphins establish social bonds. Moreover, dolphins have a sophisticated language. I once swam with dolphins while filming a television program and recorded the whistles and clicks they use to communicate with each other using an ultrasonic sensor. The recording of these signals was then analyzed by a computer. There is a simple way to determine whether a seemingly random collection of sounds constitutes intelligent speech. For example, in the English language, the letter E is used most frequently. Furthermore, we can compile a list of all the letters of the alphabet in order of their frequency of use, and no matter which book in English we analyze, the list will be roughly the same. Similarly, using the same computer program, we can analyze dolphin language, and rest assured, we will find the same signs of intelligence. However, when we move to other mammals, the patterns begin to break down, and in lower animals with small brains, they disappear altogether, and the signals become almost random. To gain insight into what extraterrestrial intelligence might resemble, let us consider the strategies that nature employs for the continuation of life. There are two main reproductive strategies that have deeply influenced evolution and consciousness. The first strategy is used by mammals and consists of producing a small number of offspring and then carefully nurturing each one to maturity. This is a risky strategy, as only a few individuals are born in each generation. However, it is believed that caring for offspring helps mitigate this drawback. This means that every life is precious, and each is cared for diligently and for a long time. But there is another, much older strategy employed by many in the plant and animal kingdoms, including insects, reptiles, and most other forms of life on Earth. Its essence lies in producing a vast number of eggs or seeds and leaving them to fate without parental care. Most offspring will not even come to light, let alone survive. So the next generation will consist of only the hardiest few. This means that parents do not invest any energy into the next generation, and the continuation of the species entirely depends on statistical laws. These two strategies give rise to remarkably different attitudes towards life and intelligence. The first values each individual without exception. Love, care, affection, and attachment flourish here as well. It is clear that such a reproductive strategy only works if parents invest a significant amount of precious energy into protecting and raising their young. The second strategy, on the other hand, places no value on the individual and is solely focused on the survival of the species or group as a whole. Here, individuality means nothing. Moreover, the choice of reproductive strategy has profound implications for the evolution of intelligence. For example, when two ants meet, they exchange a limited amount of information through chemical sense and gestures. The information conveyed is minimal, yet ants are capable of creating complex systems of tunnels and chambers necessary for building an anthill. Similarly, bees, communicating solely through dance, can collectively construct intricate hives and locate distant blooming meadows. Thus, their intelligence stems not so much from the individual, but from the holistic interaction of the entire colony and its genes. Imagine an alien civilization based on the second survival strategy, something akin to an intelligent race of bees. In such a society, a worker bee, going out every day in search of pollen, holds little value and is easily replaceable. Worker bees do not reproduce at all. They live solely to serve the hive and the queen, and are willing to sacrifice themselves at any moment for this purpose. The bonds that tie mammals mean nothing to them. Hypothetically, this could affect the nature of their space program. For instance, we value the life of each astronaut, and significant resources are spent to ensure their safe return. A large portion of the cost of space travel goes towards life support systems so that astronauts can return home and re-enter the atmosphere without harm. However, for a civilization of intelligent bees, the life of an individual worker is not highly valued, meaning their space program would be significantly cheaper. Its participants would not need to return. Each journey would be a one-way trip, resulting in considerable savings. Now imagine that we encounter an alien being that is essentially something like a worker bee. Under normal circumstances, if you were to meet a bee in the forest, it would likely pay you no mind unless you threatened it or the hive. To it, we practically do not exist. Similarly, the bee alien would likely have no reason to establish communication with us or share knowledge. It would carry out its primary task without acknowledging your presence. Moreover, our values would be incomprehensible to it. Long ago, in the 1970s, 2 plaques containing information about our world and society were sent into space aboard the Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11 spacecraft. They celebrated the diversity and richness of life on Earth. At that time, scientists believed that alien civilizations would be similar to ours, curious and interested in contact. However, if such a plaque were to come into the possession of an alien worker bee, it would likely evoke no interest and convey nothing to its fellow intelligence. Furthermore, each worker in such a civilization need not be particularly intelligent. They only need enough intelligence to serve the hive and nothing more. Therefore, if we wish to send a message to a planet inhabited by intelligent bees, our recipient, even upon receiving the message, would likely not respond. But even if we manage to establish contact with such a civilization, communicating with them would be a complex endeavor. When we communicate with one another, we mentally break down phrases and structure them, subject, action, to create a coherent narrative, most often about ourselves. Most of our phrases are structured along the lines of, "I did this," or "they did that." And a significant portion of our literature and conversations revolves around plots, often related to our experiences or those of our role models. This suggests that our main mode of conveying information is through our personal experiences. However, a civilization based on a race of intelligent bees may have no interest whatsoever in personal stories and experiences. These highly collective beings may simply lack personal messages, focusing only on facts and vital information. Personal details and gossip necessary for the hive could elevate an individual's social standing. Moreover, our conversations, personal impressions, and opinions might seem repulsive to them, as they inflate the role of the individual and prioritize individual interests over those of the collective. Additionally, a worker bee may have a completely different sense of time than we do. Since worker bees are not particularly valued, there is no need for them to live long. Perhaps this is why they engage only in short and strictly defined projects. Humans live much longer, but our actions also carry an underlying temporal motivation. We choose projects and activities whose results we can reasonably expect to see within our lifetimes. We subconsciously set the rhythm of our work, relationships with others, and even choose goals with the finiteness of our own lives in mind. In other words, we live our lives in stages: single life, marriage, raising children, and finally, well-deserved rest. Unbeknownst to ourselves, we always remember that we will eventually die within a finite span of time. But imagine beings that live for thousands of years, or perhaps are even immortal. Their priorities, goals, and ambitions would be entirely different. They might embark on projects that would take dozens of human lifetimes to complete. We often categorize interstellar travel as science fiction simply because, as we have seen, a traditional rocket flight to the nearest stars would take approximately 70,000 years. For us, this is too long, unacceptable. But for an alien form of life, this time might seem insignificant. Perhaps they can enter a state of hibernation, slow down their metabolism, or simply live indefinitely. What might they look like? The first translations of alien messages could incredibly give us some insight into the culture and lifestyle of the civilization we encounter. For instance, it is highly likely that intelligent life evolved from a predatory species and thus still possesses some characteristics of predators. On average, predators on Earth are smarter than their prey. Hunters like tigers, lions, cats, and dogs use their intelligence to stalk, attack, and hide. Each of these actions requires intelligence. All our predators have forward-facing eyes, providing stereoscopic vision, while their prey, which has eyes on the sides of their heads for better viewing, can only run away. This is why we say sly as a fox and dumb as a rabbit. Perhaps alien intelligent beings have outgrown many predatory instincts of their distant ancestors, but it is likely that some predatory consciousness still partially exists within them. Territoriality, expansion, and so on when necessary. If we take a closer look at the human race, we can see that our current intelligence is shaped by at least three main factors. First, the opposable thumb, which allows us to use tools and modify our environment. Second, stereoscopic vision, the three-dimensional eyes of a hunter. And third, language, which enables us to accumulate knowledge, culture, and wisdom from generation to generation. When we compare these three traits with characteristics found in the animal kingdom, we can see that very few animals meet such criteria for potential intelligence. Dogs and cats, for example, cannot grasp and lack a complex language. Octopuses have intricately structured tentacles, but they have poor vision and lack a developed language. Of course, variations of all three of these criteria are possible. For instance, instead of an opposable thumb, alien beings might have claws or tentacles. The only requirement is that they must be able to modify their environment using tools created by these appendages. Instead of two eyes, they might have more, like insects, or instead of eyes, they might have sensors that detect sound, ultraviolet light, or visible light. Nevertheless, it is likely that they will have the stereoscopic eyes of a hunter, as predators generally outsmart their prey. And instead of a sound-based language, they might possess a communication system based on some other form of oscillation. The only requirement is that they must be able to exchange information and ultimately create a culture that survives many generations. Beyond that, anything is possible. Another point, the consciousness of representatives of an alien civilization will likely be shaped by their environment. Today, astronomers understand that the most numerous zones of potential life in the universe are not Earth-like planets, where beings can bask in the warm light of a star, but icy moons of gas giants like Jupiter, which are separated from the star by billions of kilometers. Scientists are convinced that beneath the icy crust of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, there lies a liquid ocean heated by tidal forces. As Europa orbits Jupiter, the gravitational field of the giant planet compresses it in various directions, causing intense friction in the depths of the planetoid, generating heat and creating volcanoes and hot springs. The ice melts, forming a liquid ocean. According to scientists, the oceans on Europa are deep enough, and their volume far exceeds that of Earth's oceans. Since gas giants are present around half of all stars in the sky and are about 100 times more common than Earth-like planets, the most prevalent form of life in the universe could be inhabitants of the icy moons of gas giants like Jupiter. Therefore, the first alien civilization we encounter will likely have an aquatic origin. It is also probable that at some point they emerged from the ocean and learn to live on land, on the icy surface of their moon. There are several reasons for this. First, any species that lives permanently underwater will have a very limited understanding of the universe. If they believe that the universe is merely the ocean beneath the icy crust, they will never develop astronomy or a space program. Second, water hinders electrical contacts, so if they remain underwater, they will never invent radio or television. For a civilization to develop, it must master electronics, which is impossible in the ocean. Thus, like us once, aliens will likely have found a way to emerge from the water and survive on land. But what happens if such a civilization develops to a cosmic level and finds a way to reach Earth? Will it still be a civilization of biological organisms or a post-biological civilization? The post-biological era is a topic that Dr. Paul Davies from Arizona State University has devoted considerable thought to. To imagine what a civilization that has advanced thousands or even more years beyond us might look like, we must expand the horizons of our worldview. Considering the dangers of space travel, he believes that these beings may have long since abandoned their biological forms and represent something akin to that disembodied consciousness. Dr. Davies writes, "My conclusion is striking. I consider it highly probable and essentially even inevitable that biological intelligence will prove to be merely a transient phenomenon, a brief stage in the evolution of intelligence in the universe. If we ever encounter extraterrestrial intelligence, I believe it is highly likely that it will be post-biological in nature." This conclusion has obvious and far-reaching implications for the SETI project. If aliens have advanced thousands of years beyond us, they may well have long since abandoned their biological bodies and created the most advanced computational bodies, a planet entirely covered with computers. Dr. Davies states, "It is not hard to imagine how the entire surface of a planet could be covered by a single integrated computing system." Ray Bradbury coined the term brain matryoshka for such astonishing systems. According to Dr. Davies, alien consciousness may lose the concept of I, or selfhood, and enter a kind of collective global web of minds that covers the entire surface of the planet. Dr. Davies adds, "A powerful computer network without a sense of self would have enormous advantages over human intelligence, as it could reprogram itself, change fearlessly, merge with entire systems, and grow. Personal feelings would frankly hinder progress." Thus, he believes that for the sake of efficiency and computational power, representatives of this advanced civilization would abandon their own identity and dissolve into a collective consciousness. Incidentally, artistic development of such ideas can be found in Arthur C. Clarke's novel, Childhood's End. Dr. Davies acknowledges that critics may find this concept off-putting at first glance. This alien form sacrifices individuality and creativity for the benefit of the collective or hive. Such an outcome is not inevitable, he warns, but it is the most efficient path for a civilization. Furthermore, Dr. Davies has proposed a hypothesis that he himself finds disheartening. When I asked him why these civilizations do not visit us, he gave a strange answer. He said that any civilization so advanced would surely have created virtual realities that are far more interesting and engaging than reality itself. Our current virtual reality is child's play compared to the virtual reality of a civilization that has advanced thousands of years beyond us. This means that their best minds might prefer an imagined life in various virtual worlds. This thought is disconcerting, he admits, but it is also a possibility that should not be overlooked when developing new, more advanced forms of virtual reality. In the film The Matrix, machines seize power and place humans in capsules, using them as energy sources. That is why they keep humans alive. However, since a single power plant produces more energy than the bodies of millions of people, any alien searching for energy sources would quickly realize that humans as batteries are unnecessary. It seems the leaders of the machines in the Matrix do not understand this, but hopefully aliens would. Another possibility is that they might feed on us. In one episode of The Twilight Zone, aliens land on Earth, promising us all the wonders of their advanced technology. They even invite volunteers to visit their beautiful home planet. As they leave, they accidentally leave behind a book titled Man. Scientists frantically try to decipher the alien language to learn what marvelous gifts the kind aliens intend to share with us. Instead, it turns out that the book is actually a cookbook. The truth is, since we are likely built on entirely different proteins and DNA, their digestive systems would struggle to process us. Another hypothesis is that aliens might want to rob Earth, seizing all local resources and valuable minerals. There may be some truth to this, but if this civilization is advanced enough to travel here from the stars, they could just as easily find countless uninhabited planets and not worry about the concerned natives. From their perspective, it would be foolish to colonize an inhabited planet when simpler options exist. So, if aliens do not want to make us slaves or exploit our resources, what danger do they pose to us? Imagine a deer in the forest. Who should it fear more? A hunter with a gun or a polite builder armed with blueprints? Certainly, the hunter may frighten and even kill the deer, but realistically, he poses a threat to only a few individuals. The builder is much more dangerous because he simply does not notice the deer. He is indifferent to them. He is focused on his work, turning the forest into usable space. In light of this, let us ponder what an alien invasion might actually look like. Hollywood films contain one glaring error. Aliens there have only advanced a mere 100 years beyond humanity, so we can typically repel their attacks by developing secret weapons or exploiting some obvious weakness in their defenses, as seen in the film Earth versus the Flying Saucers. But in reality, as Dr. Seth Shostak, director of the SETI project, once told me, a battle between Earthlings and an advanced alien civilization would resemble a confrontation between an unarmed human and Godzilla. Indeed, it may turn out that aliens have outpaced us in weaponry by thousands or even millions of years, so we would likely have little we could do to defend ourselves. However, we could learn from the barbarians who once destroyed the Roman Empire, the greatest military empire of its time. The Romans were skilled engineers and could create weapons capable of completely annihilating barbarian villages, as well as build roads to supply distant military outposts of their vast empire. The barbarians were yesterday's nomads, and in battle against the well-oiled machine of the Roman army, they had virtually no chance of victory. But history shows that the fabric of the constantly expanding empire became too thin. Too many enemies emerged to fight, and too many treaties needed to be upheld, while the economy to support all of this was catastrophically lacking, especially considering the gradual decline in population. Moreover, the empire, which always lacked recruits, had to enlist young barbarians into the army and even promote them to command positions. Naturally, the advanced technologies of the empire began to seep into the hands of the barbarians. Over time, they too mastered the military arts that had once played a decisive role in their conquest. By the end of its existence, the empire, weakened by palace intrigues, severe crop failures, civil wars, and a shortage of troops, found itself face to face with barbarians who already knew how to stop the Roman army. The sack of Rome in 410 and 455 marked the prologue to the final fall of the empire in 476 AD. One could speculate that the same fate may befall aliens. At first, Earthlings will pose virtually no threat to an alien invasion. But over time, as we manage to study the weak points of the enemy's army, supply systems, command centers, and most importantly, their weaponry, the situation will change. To control the local population, the aliens will have to recruit collaborators and promote them to leadership positions. As a result, advanced technologies will gradually begin to seep into the hands of Earthlings. Then, a makeshift army of Earthlings, gathered from various sources, will be able to launch a counterattack. In Eastern military strategy, for instance, the classic treatise by Sun Tzu, The Art of War, describes a method of defeating even the strongest army. First, you must let it into your territory, and then, when it finds itself in unfamiliar terrain and its forces are spread over a large area, strike at its weakest point. Another option is to use the strength of the enemy army against itself. The main principle is, I will use the energy of the attacker for my own purposes. You allow the opponent to attack, and then you trip them or divert them, using their own mass and energy. The larger the enemy, the harder it falls. Similarly, when battling the mightiest alien army, the only chance of victory lies in letting the enemy onto your land, studying their weapons and military secrets, and then using both the weapons and secrets against them. Thus, a powerful alien army cannot be repelled immediately, but it will withdraw if an immediate victory is not achieved, and a protracted conflict becomes too costly. Success lies in depriving the enemy of chances for victory. However, I believe that aliens will be benevolent and largely indifferent to us. We simply have nothing to offer them. If they visit us, it will mostly be out of curiosity or for reconnaissance. Since curiosity has played a fundamentally important role in our path to intelligence, aliens are likely to be curious as well, and will want to explore us. This does not mean they will necessarily seek contact. Regardless of what we are shown in movies, we are unlikely to meet extraterrestrial beings directly. For them, it would simply be too dangerous and unnecessary. If we have sent rovers to explore Mars, aliens will likely send organic or mechanical surrogates or avatars to Earth instead of themselves, which would better withstand the rigors of interstellar travel. Thus, the aliens we encounter on the lawn of the White House may bear little resemblance to their creators, who remain on their home planet, while the hosts project their consciousness onto them through space using intermediate stations. However, it is even more likely that they will send robotic probes to our moon, as it is geologically stable and not subject to erosion. These probes will be self-replicating. They will build a factory and produce, say, 1,000 copies of themselves. Such probes are called von Neumann probes, named after mathematician John von Neumann, who laid the foundations for digital computer theory. Von Neumann was the first mathematician to seriously consider the task of creating machines capable of reproducing themselves. Probes of the second generation will then travel to other star systems, where each will, in turn, build thousands of third-generation probes. The total number of probes will then reach 1,000,000. The new probes will scatter in all directions and build their factories, increasing the total number of probes to 1,000,000,000. It all starts with one probe. Then we have 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000. After 5 generations, we will have a quadrillion probes. Very soon, a massive sphere will emerge, expanding at near light speed and composed of trillions of robots. Thus, it is possible to colonize the entire galaxy in just a few 100,000 years. Dr. Davies takes the idea of self-replicating von Neumann probes so seriously that he has already requested funding for a new project to explore the moon's surface for evidence of alien visits. He wants to scan the moon's surface for radio emissions or radiation anomalies that could indicate visits by aliens that may have occurred millions of years ago. Together with Dr. Robert Wagner, he wrote an article urging scientists to meticulously examine photographs from American satellites down to resolutions of 0.5 of a meter. The scientists write that the likelihood of alien technologies leaving traces on the moon in the form of artifacts or modifications to the lunar landscape is extremely low. But the moon is still a good place for searches simply because it is nearby. Moreover, traces of alien technologies would have lasted a long time on the moon. There is no erosion there, so signs of aliens would still be visible, just as the footprints of American astronauts left in the 1970s could, in principle, remain for billions of years. One problem, however, is that a von Neumann probe could be very small. Probes that utilize molecular machines and microelectromechanical devices can be no larger than, or even smaller than, a loaf of bread, Dr. Davies told me. If such a probe were to land on Earth in someone's yard, the owner might not even notice it. Nevertheless, this method of using an exponentially growing number of self-replicating probes represents the most efficient way to colonize the galaxy. Incidentally, this is precisely how a virus infects our bodies. It all starts with a handful of viruses. Each one takes over a cell, triggering a reproduction mechanism, turning the cell into a factory for producing new viruses. Within 2 weeks, one virus can infect trillions of cells, and we begin to sneeze. If the scenario is correct, then the moon is the most suitable place for an alien visit. This very option served as the basis for the film 201, A Space Odyssey, which even today represents the most likely scenario for encountering an extraterrestrial civilization. In the film, a probe was left on the moon millions of years ago, primarily to observe the evolution of life on Earth. From time to time, it intervened in the course of evolution, giving it an additional boost. Then, the probe's information was transmitted to the Jupiter system, to an intermediate station, and then to the home planet of this ancient civilization. It is clear that from the perspective of that advanced civilization, capable of simultaneously monitoring billions of star systems, the choice of planetary systems for colonization is quite vast. Given the enormity of the galaxy, they can gather data from numerous systems and then calmly choose which planets and moons are best for resource extraction. Perhaps they will not find Earth appealing. In February 2011, a historic event occurred. An IBM computer named Watson did what many critics deemed impossible. It defeated 2 human opponents in a quiz game. In Russia, a similar game is called Own Game. Millions of viewers glued to their screens watched in astonishment as Watson methodically destroyed its opponents on national television. The computer answered questions that left its opponents stumped and ultimately earned the right to claim a prize of $1 million. Both sides made an effort to remove all limitations and assemble a machine of truly monumental computational power. Watson is capable of processing data at an astonishing speed of 500 gigabytes per second, equivalent to 1 million books per second, and has 16 terabytes of RAM. Additionally, it stores 200 million pages of various reference materials, including the entire volume of knowledge from Wikipedia. Thus, in real time, Watson had the opportunity to analyze this mountain of information. Watson represents merely the latest generation of expert systems, computer programs that utilize formal logic to access vast amounts of specialized information. When you connect by phone to an automated system that presents you with a menu of options, you are dealing with a primitive expert system. Naturally, expert systems will continue to evolve, making our lives more convenient and efficient. Currently, engineers are working on creating a doctor robot that will appear on the screen of a wristwatch or a large wall screen and provide almost free medical advice with 99% accuracy. You will describe your symptoms to it, and it will search databases of leading medical centers worldwide and compile the latest scientific information. This will help avoid unnecessary doctor visits and costly false alarms. Regular consultations with a doctor will no longer require any effort. Over time, we may also have a robot lawyer capable of answering any routine economic question, or a robot secretary that can easily organize your vacation, travel, or business lunch. Of course, for specialized assistance and professional advice, you will still need a live lawyer, doctor, or secretary. But for answers to everyday questions, such programs will suffice. Additionally, scientists have created so-called chatbots capable of mimicking ordinary conversation. The average person typically knows tens of thousands of words. Reading newspapers requires knowledge of around 2,000 words or more, but conversation usually involves the use of only a few hundred words. Robots can be programmed to engage in conversation with such a limited vocabulary, provided, of course, that the conversation is confined to a few strictly defined topics. The favorite scare tactic of the media: robots are coming. Shortly after Watson won the competition, some misguided experts were already wringing their hands in advance, mourning the dreadful day when machines would take over. Above us is Ken Jennings, one of the contestants who entered the computer championship. He remarked in a conversation with a press representative, for example, "I welcome our new computer overlords." Experts wondered, if Watson could defeat seasoned contestants in a head-to-head competition, what chances do we, mere mortals, have against machines? Jennings half-jokingly stated that it was nonsense. The second contestant and I became the first workers in the knowledge industry to lose our jobs at the hands of a new generation of thinking machines. However, the commentator forgot to mention that a person cannot approach a computer and congratulate it on its victory. It is impossible to pat it on the back or share champagne with it. It would not understand what that means. Moreover, Watson is completely unaware that it has won. Stripping away the fantasies of sensationalist journalists, it turns out that Watson is a highly complex counting machine capable of performing computational operations or searching for data billions of times faster than the human brain. A machine that lacks self-awareness and common sense entirely. On one hand, there has been remarkable progress in the field of artificial intelligence, especially in terms of computational power. A person living in the early 20th century, observing today's computer calculations, would consider machines to be miraculous. But on the other hand, when it comes to creating machines capable of independent thought, true thinking automatons that do not require a puppeteer or an operator with a joystick or remote control, the progress is minimal. Robots still have no concept that they are robots. According to Moore's law, the computational power of computers has doubled every 2 years over the past 50 years, leading some to believe that it is only a matter of time before machines gain self-awareness that can rival that of humans. No one knows when this will happen, but humanity must be prepared for the moment when machine consciousness leaves the confines of laboratories and enters the world. How we treat machine consciousness may determine the future of the human race. Predicting the future of artificial intelligence is difficult, as it has already experienced 3 cycles of boom and bust. In the early days, during the 1950s, it seemed that mechanical maids and bartenders were just around the corner. Machines were created that could play checkers, solve algebraic problems, and manipulators were developed that could recognize and lift bricks. At Stanford University, a robot named Shaky was built, a computer on a wheeled cart with a camera, capable of navigating a room and avoiding obstacles on its own. Very soon, enthusiastic articles predicting the emergence of companion robots began to appear in scientific journals. Some predictions were even overly conservative. For example, in 1949, Popular Mechanics declared that in the future, computers would weigh no more than 1.5 tons. But others were wildly optimistic, claiming that the day of robots was near. Shaky would someday become a mechanical maid or butler, vacuuming carpets and opening doors. Films like 201, A Space Odyssey, convinced us that very soon robots would be piloting our rockets to Jupiter and chatting with astronauts. In 1965, Dr. Herbert Simon, one of the founders of artificial intelligence theory, confidently stated that within 20 years, machines would be able to do everything a human does. 2 years later, another founding father of artificial intelligence, Dr. Marvin Minsky, said that during this generation's lifetime, the problem of creating artificial intelligence would largely be solved. But by the 70s, all this boundless optimism collapsed. Checkers computers could only play checkers and nothing more. Mechanical arms could lift bricks, and that was it. There were circus ponies trained to perform a single trick. The most advanced robots took hours to navigate a room, and in unfamiliar settings, Shaky easily got lost, and scientists failed to make any progress in understanding the nature of consciousness. In 1974, artificial intelligence suffered a severe blow. The governments of the United States and Britain significantly cut funding for research in this area. In the 80s, as computer processing power grew, a new gold rush in artificial intelligence emerged, fueled by Pentagon planners hoping to create soldier robots for the battlefield. By 1985, funding for artificial intelligence research reached $1 billion a year, with hundreds of millions spent on projects like SmartThrough, which aim to create smart autonomous carts capable of penetrating enemy territory, conducting reconnaissance missions, and carrying out tasks such as rescuing hostages before returning to their own territory. Unfortunately, the only thing they learned to do well was to get lost. The blatant failures of such costly projects led to another wave of disillusionment with artificial intelligence in the 90s. Paul Abrahams, reflecting on his years at MIT, said, "It was as if groups of people proposed to build a tower to the moon. Each time, they proudly pointed out how much higher their tower had become compared to the previous year. The only problem was that the moon wasn't getting any closer." But computational power continues to grow steadily. Today, it can be said that a renaissance in artificial intelligence has begun. There is a slow but real movement forward. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue computer won a chess match against world champion Garry Kasparov. In 2005, Stanford's robotic car won the DARPA Grand Challenge for driverless vehicles. New achievements lie ahead. The question remains, will the third time be the charm? Today, scientists understand that they have greatly underestimated the problem because most human thinking occurs at a subconscious level. Conscious thoughts are merely a tiny part of the brain's work. Dr. Steven Pinker says, "I would pay a good amount for a robot that could clear the dishes off the table or perform simple tasks, but I can't do that because the minor tasks that need to be solved to create such a robot, such as pattern recognition, sound reasoning, and controlling hands and feet, represent unresolved engineering challenges." Many films assure us that terrible Terminators are just around the corner, but the task of creating artificial intelligence is far more complex than previously thought. I once asked Dr. Minsky when machines would match us in intelligence, or perhaps even surpass us. He confidently replied, "It will definitely happen," but he no longer makes predictions about dates. Given the tumultuous history of artificial intelligence, this is probably the most sensible approach. We can describe its future without naming specific dates. Developers of artificial intelligence face at least two fundamental problems: pattern recognition and common sense. Our best robots struggle to recognize simple objects like a cup or a ball. If you take a robot to an unfamiliar busy street, it will quickly lose its bearings and get lost. A robot's eye can distinguish details better than a human's, but a robot's brain cannot comprehend what it sees. Therefore, pattern recognition, essentially object recognition, is progressing much more slowly than expected. When entering a room, a robot must perform trillions of actions, breaking visible objects down into points, lines, circles, squares, and triangles, and trying to match them with one of thousands of stored images. Thus, robots see a chair as a jumble of points and lines, but cannot easily identify its essence as a chair. Even if a robot can successfully match an object with an image from its database, simply turning the chair, say, dropping it on the floor, or changing the perspective by looking at it from a different angle, can stump the robot. The human brain automatically accounts for these differences and other variations. The brain subconsciously performs trillions of operations, and it seems to us that the process requires no effort. Moreover, robots have issues with common sense. They lack basic facts about the physical and biological world. There is no equation that can confirm such self-evident statements for us humans as raw weather is unpleasant, or a mother is always older than her daughter. Some progress has been made in translating such information into the language of mathematical logic, but the fact is that articulating common sense even for a 4-year-old child would require hundreds of millions of lines of computer code. As Voltaire once said, ordinary common sense is not so ordinary. For instance, one of the most advanced robots, named Asimo, was created in Japan, where 30% of the world's industrial robots are produced by Honda. This marvelous robot, about the size of a small boy, can walk, run, climb stairs, speak several languages, and dance much better than I can. By the way, I have interacted with Asimo several times on television and was pleasantly surprised by its abilities. However, I had the opportunity to meet Asimo's creators in person, and I asked them a key question. How intelligent is this robot compared to, say, an animal? They admitted to me that we might be talking about the intelligence of a bug at best. Walking and talking are mainly tricks for the press. The problem is that Asimo is essentially a large tape recorder. It has a very limited set of truly autonomous functions. Almost every sound and every movement has to be programmed in advance. It took us about 3 hours to record a short clip of me interacting with Asimo, because every gesture and every movement was programmed by a whole team of assistants. When we consider all of this alongside our definition of human consciousness, it becomes clear that today's robots are stuck at a very primitive level. They are still trying to understand the physical and social world and master basic facts. As a result, robots have yet to reach the stage where they can model the future. For example, if you want to ask a robot to plan a bank robbery, you would assume that it knows basic facts about banks, such as where money is stored, what kind of security system is in place, and how police and bystanders will react to the situation. Some of this can be programmed, but there are hundreds of nuances that the human brain naturally understands, which robots do not comprehend at all. Robots excel at modeling the future only in one strictly defined area, such as playing chess, weather modeling, or simulating galaxy collisions, since the rules of chess and the laws of gravity have been known for centuries. Successful modeling of a chess game or the solar system depends solely on computational power and time. Attempts have been made to overcome this level using brute force. For instance, a program called CYC was developed with the goal of solving common sense problems. CYC included millions of lines of computer code with a complete set of information about common sense and knowledge necessary to understand the surrounding world. The authors of the program did not achieve significant success. While CYC can process hundreds of thousands of facts and millions of statements, it cannot replicate the intelligence level of a 4-year-old child. Unfortunately, after several optimistic press releases, work on the project virtually came to a halt. Many programmers left the project. All deadlines passed, but the project is still alive and active. Is the brain a computer? Where did we go wrong? For the last 50 years, scientists working on artificial intelligence problems have tried to model the brain by analogy with digital computers. But perhaps this is too strong a simplification. As Joseph Campbell once said, computers are like Old Testament gods, a lot of rules and no mercy. If you remove even one transistor from a Pentium processor, the computer will immediately fail, while the human brain can function reasonably well, even if half of it is missing. The fact is that the brain is not a digital computer, but a highly complex neural network. Unlike a digital computer, whose architecture remains constant and unchanged, input, output, and processor, a neural network is a collection of neurons that constantly changes configuration and strengthens after each new task is completed. The brain has no program, operating system, or central processor. Instead, its neural networks are massively parallelized, and when performing a single task, learning information, 100 billion neurons are activated simultaneously. In light of all this, artificial intelligence researchers are beginning to doubt the top-down approach they have used for the past 50 years. An example of such an approach is the attempt to record all the rules of common sense in CYC. Today, artificial intelligence researchers are trying once again to carefully consider the opposite bottom-up approach. This approach means attempting to follow Mother Nature by creating intelligent beings, us, through evolution, starting with simple animals like worms or fish, and building increasingly complex organisms. Neural networks must learn on their own, making mistakes and encountering obstacles. Dr. Rodney Brooks, former director of MIT's renowned artificial intelligence laboratory and one of the founders of iRobot, the company that produces those robotic vacuum cleaners that now crawl through many living rooms, proposed a completely new approach to artificial intelligence. Why not create small, compact, bug-like robots that would learn to walk on their own, as happens in nature, instead of developing large, clumsy robots? He told me that he has always admired the behavior of mosquitoes, which, with their tiny brains containing very few neurons, can maneuver in the air better than any robotic airplane. He built a series of remarkably simple robots that he likes to call insectoids and bots, and they zipped around and managed to outmaneuver more traditional robots. The aim of this project was to create robots that, so to speak, would live by the laws of Mother Nature and learn through trial and error. In other words, they would learn to move by bumping into everything around them. At first glance, it may seem that this process requires a complex program, but in reality, neural networks do not require any programming at all. The only thing a neural network does is constantly change the structure of its internal connections, strengthening some of them every time it makes the right decision. So programming is not the issue. The main change is in the network itself. Once upon a time, science fiction envisioned complex humanoid robots working on Mars, walking and talking just like us, and possessing almost human-like intelligence thanks to clever programming. The reality is quite the opposite. Today, the surface of Mars is being roamed by the descendants of this approach, such as the Curiosity rover. They are not programmed to walk and possess the intelligence of a bug, yet they manage quite well in the Martian environment. Bot robots have relatively few pre-programmed functions. Instead, they learn through experience, so to speak. Perhaps the simplest way to understand why true autonomous robots do not yet exist is to measure their level of consciousness. 4 levels of consciousness can be distinguished. Level 0 describes thermostats and plants, involving a few feedback loops based on simple parameters such as temperature or sunlight. Level 1 describes insects and reptiles, which are mobile and have a central nervous system. It creates a model of the surrounding world with the addition of a new parameter, spatial position. Next comes Level 2 consciousness, which creates a model of the world considering relationships with peers. This requires emotions. Finally, Level 3 consciousness describes humans. It includes time and self-awareness, models future developments, and determines its own place in these models. One can use such a theory to assess the level of consciousness of today's robots. First-generation robots were at Level 0 consciousness since they were static and lacked wheels or limbs for walking. Today's robots correspond to Level 1, as they are mobile, but within this level, they occupy the lowest tier, as they navigate the real world with immense difficulty. Their consciousness can be compared to that of a worm or a slow insect. To achieve a full Level 1 consciousness, scientists will need to create robots capable of realistically mimicking the consciousness of insects and reptiles. Even insects possess abilities that today's robots lack. They can quickly hide, find a mate in the forest, search for food and shelter, recognize predators, and evade them. As mentioned earlier, consciousness at each level can be numerically assessed by the number of feedback loops. For example, robots with vision have several feedback loops, as their visual sensors can register shadows, outlines, curves, and geometric shapes in three-dimensional space. Similarly, robots equipped with hearing need sensors for clarity, sound intensity, accents, pauses, and the like. The total number of feedback loops in them can reach about 10, while an insect living in the wild may have 50 or more. To rise to Level 2, robots will need to learn to model the world considering relationships with others. Level 2. Consciousness can be roughly estimated as the product of the number of group members and the number of emotions and gestures they use to communicate with one another. Thus, robots would have Level 2 consciousness with a value of 0, but it can be hoped that the emotional robots being created today in laboratories will soon raise their level. Current robots perceive humans as a collection of pixels moving on sensor screens, but some artificial intelligence researchers are already beginning to create robots capable of recognizing emotions through facial expressions and tone of voice. This is the first step toward robots understanding that a human is not just a collection of random pixels and can be in various emotional states. In the next few decades, robots will gradually rise within Level 2 consciousness. Initially, they will match the intelligence of a mouse, then a rat, a rabbit, and eventually a cat. It is possible that by the end of the century, they will catch up with primates in intelligence and begin to set their own goals. Once robots possess practical common sense and theories of mind, they will be able to conduct complex future modeling with themselves in the lead role and thus transition to Level 3 consciousness. They will leave the world of the present and enter the world of the future. This, of course, is many decades away from the real capabilities of any current robot. Future modeling means that you have a good understanding of the laws of nature and causality, possess common sense, and can therefore foresee future events. It also means that you understand human intentions and motives, and thus can predict people's behavior in the future. A numerical assessment of Level 3 consciousness is obtained by dividing the total number of causal relationships that can be identified when modeling the future in various situations by the average value of a control group. Today, computers can conduct limited modeling across several parameters. For example, they can simulate the collision of two galaxies, the airflow around a flying airplane, or the behavior of a building during an earthquake, but they are completely unprepared to model the future in complex life situations. Therefore, the IQ level of consciousness can be assessed as Level 3 with a value of 5. It is clear that it will take many decades of serious effort before we have a robot capable of functioning normally in human society. Obstacles on the path. So when will robots finally be able to catch up to and surpass humans in intelligence? Of course, no one knows, but there are many predictions. Most of them are based on the assumption that Moore's law will continue to hold for the next few decades. However, Moore's law is not a law in the strict sense. Moreover, it essentially violates a fundamental law of nature and contradicts quantum theory. Moore's law, as such, cannot operate indefinitely. Even today, we see a slowdown in development. By the end of this decade, or perhaps next, the process may come to a complete halt, and the consequences of this, especially for Silicon Valley, could be quite grim. The crux of the problem is simply that at the moment, you can place hundreds of millions of silicon transistors on a chip the size of a fingernail, but there is a specific limit to the density of element packaging. Today, the thinnest layer of silicon on a Pentium chip is about 20 atoms thick. By 2020, the thickness of such a layer may shrink to 5 atoms, but then the Heisenberg uncertainty principle will come into play. You will not be able to determine precisely where an electron is, and it may gradually leak away from the conductive layer, causing a short circuit in the chip. In the appendix, we will discuss quantum theory and the uncertainty principle in more detail. Additionally, such a chip will generate enough heat to fry an egg. Leaks and heat will inevitably put an end to Moore's law over time. A replacement will be needed. If placing transistors on a flat substrate is nearing its limit in terms of computational power, Intel is betting billions of dollars that chips will soon take on a third dimension and become volumetric. Time will tell if their hopes are justified. One of the most serious challenges of volumetric chips is that heat dissipation rapidly increases with the thickness of the chip. Microsoft is exploring other possibilities, such as increasing the area of chips with parallel data processing. One option is to arrange chips horizontally in a row. Then the problem to be solved will need to be broken down programmatically into parts. Each part solved separately on a small chip, and finally, the information will be reassembled. However, this is not so simple. Software capabilities are growing much more slowly than the exponential growth we have come to associate with Moore's law. Such measures may extend the life of Moore's law for a few years, but eventually, all of this will inevitably come to an end, and quantum theory will prevail. This means that physicists are already experimenting with a wide range of alternatives intended to replace silicon. These could include quantum or molecular, optical or nanocomputers, DNA computers, and so on. However, none of these technologies have yet been brought to practical fruition. Let us suppose for a moment that someday humanity will coexist on the planet with incredibly complex robots, possibly based on molecular rather than silicon transistors. Do we want robots to resemble us, and how closely? Japan is the world leader in creating robots that resemble cute puppies and children, but Japanese designers try not to make their robots too human-like. This makes people uneasy. The first phenomenon, known as the uncanny valley, was researched by Dr. Masahiro Mori in Japan in 1970. Its essence is that when a person sees a robot that closely resembles a human, they experience a feeling of repulsion. In fact, Darwin first mentioned such an effect in 1839 during his journey on the Beagle, and Freud wrote about it in his essay, The Uncanny. Since then, this phenomenon has been thoroughly studied not only by artificial intelligence specialists, but also by animators, advertisers, and anyone involved in promoting products related to humanoid images. For example, in a review of the film The Polar Express, a CNN journalist noted, "The characters in the film give you chills." So, The Polar Express is at best unsettling and at worst slightly horrifying. According to Dr. Mori, the more a robot resembles a human, the stronger the empathy we feel toward it, but only up to a certain point. When a robot's appearance comes very close to human, empathy sharply declines. Hence the concept of the uncanny valley. If a robot looks very much like us, except for a few minor details that seem creepy, it triggers feelings of repulsion in humans out of fear. However, if a robot looks completely like a human and is indistinguishable from you or me, we again exhibit positive emotions. All of this can lead to quite practical conclusions. For example, should robots smile? At first glance, it seems obvious that robots should smile when greeting people and showing them friendliness. A smile is a universal gesture of warmth and goodwill, but if a robot's smile is too realistic, it may have a chilling effect on people. By the way, Halloween masks often depict terrifying vampires with wide grins, so perhaps only childlike robots with round faces and big eyes, or those completely indistinguishable from humans, should smile and no one else. When a person forces a smile, they activate facial muscles through commands from the prefrontal cortex. But when the smile is natural, it is controlled by the limbic system, and slightly different muscles are involved. The human brain can detect the subtle difference between the two, and this feature has positively influenced the course of evolution. This effect can also be studied through brain imaging. For instance, one could place a subject in an MRI and show them a video recording of a robot that looks indistinguishable from a human, but moves slightly differently, a bit jerkily and mechanically. The brain, upon seeing something, always tries to predict the future behavior of the object. Seeing a fully humanoid robot, the brain predicts that it will move like a human. However, when the robot starts moving like a machine, a contradiction arises that causes us anxiety. In particular, the parietal lobe is activated, especially that part where the motor cortex borders the visual area. It is believed that mirror neurons are present in this area of the parietal lobe. In this case, the visual cortex takes in the image of the humanoid robot, while its movement is predicted by the motor cortex through mirror neurons. The orbital frontal cortex, located just behind the eyes, brings all this together and declares, "Something is not right here." Hollywood directors are well aware of this effect, spending millions of dollars on horror films. They understand that the scariest scene is not where a giant blob emerges from the bushes or Frankenstein's monster appears, but the scariest scene is the one where we see the distortion of the ordinary. Remember the film The Exorcist? During which scene did viewers experience the strongest wave of nausea and run out of the theater or faint right in their seats? Perhaps during the appearance of the demon? No. Theaters around the world erupted with wild screams and loud sobs at the moment Linda Blair turned her head around backward. This effect can be demonstrated on young monkeys. When shown an image of Dracula or Frankenstein, they laugh and tear up the pictures, but an image of a decapitated monkey causes them to scream in horror. Once again, the strongest fear is evoked by the distortion of the ordinary. In Chapter 2, we mentioned that the space-time theory of consciousness explains the nature of humor, as the brain models possible developments, and then here's the punchline, the most crucial and necessarily unexpected phrase. The same explanation applies to the nature of horror. The brain models the future of an ordinary mundane event, and then experiences shock when the ordinary is suddenly distorted. Thus, robots will continue to resemble children in appearance, even if they catch up to humans in intelligence, And only when robots learn to behave entirely like humans will designers make them truly resemble people. Silicon consciousness. Human consciousness is like a patchwork quilt of various abilities that have developed over millions of years of evolution, acquiring information about the physical and social world around us. Robots are unlikely to reach the level of human consciousness, as their ability to learn and adapt remains limited. They may create models that are as good as, or in some respects, even better than ours, but their consciousness will likely differ from ours in two key areas: emotions and goals. It has happened that artificial intelligence researchers have sidelined the issue of emotions, considering it secondary, with the primary goal being to create a robot that is logical and rational rather than impulsive. Therefore, in the science fiction of the 1950s and 1960s, most robots and humanoids, such as Spock from Star Trek, possessed perfect logical minds. We have already seen that due to the uncanny valley, a robot must appear in a very specific way to coexist with humans. Some believe that this is not enough, and robots should also possess emotions so that we can befriend them, care for them, and interact productively. In other words, a robot needs a second-level consciousness. To achieve this, they must first learn to recognize the full spectrum of human emotions. By analyzing subtle movements of the face, eyebrows, eyelids, lips, and cheeks, a robot will be able to determine a person's emotional state. The furthest advancement in this area has likely been made by the M3 Media Lab. I have been fortunate to visit this lab near Boston several times, and each visit felt like a tour of a toy factory for adults. Everywhere I looked, my gaze encountered futuristic high-tech devices designed to make our lives more interesting, joyful, and convenient. Looking around, I saw many things that later appeared in Hollywood films, such as Minority Report and AI artificial intelligence. Wandering through this playground of the future, I came across two fascinating robots. From the south was Yandex. Its creator, Dr. September Easel, explained to me that these robots have a special purpose. Hugo is a smart, robotic teddy bear capable of connecting with children. He can recognize their emotions. He has a camera instead of eyes, a speaker instead of a mouth, and skin sensors, allowing him to feel when he is tickled, poked, or hugged. One day, a robot like this may become a mentor, nanny, caregiver, or playmate for a child. Nixie, on the other hand, can connect with adults. Externally, he resembles the company's mascot. He has a round, friendly face with large eyes that he can move. He has already been tested in a nursing home and was very well received by all the elderly patients. Having become accustomed to Nixie, the elderly loved talking to him and kissing him, and they missed him greatly when he was taken away. See figure number 12. Dr. Breetley told me that she created them in Yandex because none of the existing robots at that time met her expectations. They all looked like cans filled with wires, gears, and motors. To design a robot capable of interacting with people on an emotional level, she had to understand the mechanisms of such interaction. Additionally, she needed robots that were not tethered to a laboratory table but could venture into the real world. That is why, in 2004, Breetley decided it was time to create a new generation of social robots capable of living anywhere, in families, schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. At the Waseda University in Japan, scientists are working on creating a robot whose emotions, fear, anger, surprise, joy, disgust, sadness, are expressed through movements of the upper body. It can hear and see, sense, smells, and touch. It is programmed to achieve simple goals, such as satisfying its energy needs and avoiding dangerous situations. The scientist's goal is to integrate feelings and emotions so that the robot can act according to the situation. The European Commission is funding a project called Felix, aimed at working on artificial intelligence in collaboration with scientists from the United Kingdom, France, Switzerland, and Greece. Emotional robots. Meet Felix. When he is happy, he reaches out his arms and craves hugs. When he is sad, he lowers his head and shoulders and looks lost. When he is scared, he hides in fear until someone calms him by patting his head. He behaves exactly like a 1-year-old boy. In reality, he is a robot about half a meter tall, and he looks much like the robots found in toy stores. In fact, he is one of the most advanced emotional robots on Earth. He was created by scientists from the University of Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom, with funding from the European Union. His creators programmed him to express emotions such as joy and sadness, fear, joyful excitement, and pride. While other robots convey emotions at best through rudimentary facial and verbal gestures, he has mastered body language, the language of poses and gestures. He can even dance. Unlike other robots that specialize in expressing only one specific emotion, he has mastered a wide range of emotional reactions. First, he focuses on the faces of visitors, recognizes familiar ones, and recalls past encounters with each of them. Then he starts tracking all their movements. This allows him to follow their gaze and determine where a person is looking. In the third stage, he begins to build relationships with visitors and learns to respond to their gestures. For example, if you smile at him or pat him on the head, he understands that this is a good sign. His brain operates on neural networks, so he learns through interaction with people. In the fourth stage, he exhibits emotions in response to interactions. His emotional reactions are pre-programmed and played back from a recording, but he decides which emotion to choose based on the situation. Finally, the more he interacts with a specific person, the better he understands that person's mood, and the stronger the bond between them becomes. He does not just have his own personality. He has several. He learns through interaction with people, and each contact is unique. So over time, he begins to exhibit several different characters. One of them, for instance, is independent, self-sufficient, and does not require special guidance from a human. Another is shy, timid, scared of any object in the room, and demands constant attention. The project is led by Dr. Lola Kanyamira, a computer science specialist from the University of Hertfordshire. Before starting work on this ambitious project, she analyzed the behavior of chimpanzees in a group. Her goal was to reproduce the emotional behavior of a 1-year-old chimpanzee as accurately as possible. Today, in her opinion, there is already a place for such emotional robots. Like Dr. Breatley, she wants to use them to ease the psychological state of young children who are forced to stay in hospitals. She says, "We want them to play several roles. Robots will help children understand their treatment plan and explain what needs to be done. We want to help children cope with anxiety." Another possibility is that such robots could become companions for patients in nursing homes. They could be a valuable addition to the staff of any hospital, and someday, robots like him could become playmates and family members for children. It is difficult to predict the future, but it won't be long before your computer transforms into a social robot. You will be able to talk to it, flirt, even get angry, and shout at it. and it will understand you and your emotions, says Dr. Torrance Sinofsky from the Salk Institute near San Diego. The challenge is not in the concept itself, but in calibrating the robot's response. If the owner is angry or dissatisfied, the robot must somehow take these emotions into account. It is important to explore whether artificial intelligence has begun to understand that emotions may be the key to consciousness. Neurobiologists, such as Dr. Antonio Damasio, have discovered that when the connection between the prefrontal cortex, which governs rational thought, and the emotional centers, namely the limbic system, is damaged, patients are unable to evaluate anything. They cannot make even the simplest decisions: what to buy, when to schedule a meeting, what color pen to choose. To them, everything around seems to have equal value. So emotions are not a luxury. They are absolutely necessary, and without them, a robot would struggle to determine what is important and what is not. Emotions, which were once seen as peripheral to artificial intelligence, are now coming to the forefront. In a fire, a robot may initially save not people, but computer files, as the program tells it that valuable documents cannot be replaced, while workers can always be replaced. It is crucial for the robot's program to allow it to distinguish the important from the unimportant, and emotions are the quickest path the brain uses to assess information. Thus, a robot will need a value system that human life is more important than material objects, that children should be saved first in case of danger, that expensive items are more valuable than cheap ones, and so on. Robots do not come into existence with a ready-made value system, so each will need to be loaded with a long list of predetermined evaluations. However, the problem with emotions is that sometimes they can be completely irrational, while robots are mathematically precise. Therefore, their consciousness may differ fundamentally from human consciousness. Humans have little control over their emotions. On one hand, because they arise quickly, and on the other, because they originate in the limbic system rather than the prefrontal cortex. Moreover, our emotions are generally far from neutral. Numerous tests show that we tend to overestimate the abilities of attractive people. Generally, attractive individuals tend to rise higher on the social ladder, securing better jobs, even if they are less talented than others. As the saying goes, beauty has its advantages. It is unlikely that silicon consciousness will take into account the subtle nuances we consider when meeting someone. We, as humans, for instance, have body language. When entering a room, a young man typically yields to the elderly, and a simple clerk shows politeness to superiors. We demonstrate respect through our postures, movements, choice of words, and gestures. Body language predates ordinary language. It is literally embedded in our brains. If robots are to coexist in society with humans, they will need to master this art and learn all the behavioral details that we perceive at a subconscious level. Human consciousness reflects the features of our evolutionary past, which robots lack. Thus, silicon consciousness may not have our gaps and twists in the emotional repertoire, as emotions will need to be programmed externally. It is possible that manufacturers will offer customers a menu of emotions, carefully selected based on whether they are necessary, beneficial, or enhance the emotional connection with the owner. Apparently, robots will only be programmed with a few human emotions depending on the situation. Perhaps owners will value loyalty the most. Of course, everyone wants a robot that would honestly and without complaint follow any commands, understand the owner's needs and anticipate their desires. On the other hand, the last thing an owner needs is a robot with its own attitude toward life that will snap back, criticize everyone around, or whine. Criticism may be needed, but it should be constructive and tactful. If people start giving a robot conflicting commands, it should be able to ignore all but those from the owner. Empathy is another emotion that robot owners will surely appreciate. A robot equipped with empathy will understand others' problems and come to their aid by reading facial muscle movements and listening to the tone of voice. Such a robot will be able to determine if a person is upset and offer help if possible. Strangely enough, fear is also highly desirable. Emotions are not just there for show. Evolution has equipped us with a sense of fear. Fear helps us avoid dangers. Robots, even though they are made of steel, will also need to fear certain potentially dangerous things, such as falling from heights or intense fire. A completely fearless robot would be useless if it ended up destroying itself at the first opportunity. However, some emotions may need to be eliminated, prohibited, or at least strictly regulated. This primarily concerns anger, as robots will likely possess significant physical strength. An angry robot could create problems both at home and in the workplace. Anger could overshadow its sense of duty, leading to damage to property. Interestingly, the original evolutionary purpose of anger was to demonstrate dissatisfaction. This, by the way, can be done rationally, without rudeness or malice. Another emotion that will need to be excluded is the desire to command. A domineering robot will always create problems. Moreover, it could challenge the authority and wishes of the owner. This point is crucial in the question of whether robots will ever surpass humans. Thus, a robot will always have to yield to the owner's desires, even if it is not the best solution. But perhaps the most challenging emotion to implement will be a sense of humor, which can, like glue, instantly unite completely foreign people. A simple joke can often diffuse or, conversely, escalate a situation. The basic mechanism of humor is simple. There is always the main element, a completely unexpected phrase. But there are plenty of subtleties in this matter. In fact, we often judge others by how they react to certain jokes. If a person uses humor as a measure to evaluate others, one can imagine how difficult it would be to create a robot that could determine whether a joke is funny or not. President Ronald Reagan, for example, was famous for being able to counter the most challenging questions with a joke. Moreover, he amassed a vast collection of jokes, quips, and witticisms because he understood the importance and power of humor. Some experts believe he won the presidential debate against Walter Mondale when he responded to the question, "Isn't he too old to be president?" by saying he wouldn't hold his opponent's youth against him. On the other hand, inappropriate laughter can have catastrophic consequences and is sometimes a sign of mental illness. A robot must know the difference between laughter with someone and laughter at someone. Actors know very well that laughter can be very different. With their help, they can express horror, cynicism, joy, anger, or sadness. So, for robots, at least until the theories of artificial intelligence are sufficiently developed, it is better to stay away from humor and laughter. Up to this point, we have avoided the question of how exactly emotions can be programmed into a computer. Emotions are so complex that programming them will likely have to occur in several stages. The first step, the simplest part of the task, is recognizing emotions by analyzing a person's facial expressions, the position of their lips, eyebrows, and tone of voice. Modern facial recognition technologies are already capable of creating a dictionary of emotions, that is, determining what certain facial expressions mean. This process, it should be noted, dates back to Charles Darwin, who spent significant time cataloging emotions common to both animals and humans. The second step is that the robot must react very quickly to this emotion. This is also not difficult. If someone nearby laughs, the robot will smile. If someone is angry, the robot will get out of their way and try to avoid conflict. The robot's program will contain a large encyclopedia of emotions, so it will know how to respond quickly to any of them. The third stage may prove to be the most challenging, as it involves attempting to determine the internal motivation behind the initial emotion. This is difficult because the same emotion can arise in different situations. Laughter can mean that a person is happy, that they heard a funny joke, or that they saw someone fall into a puddle. Laughter can also indicate that a person is nervous, anxious, or wants to insult someone. Similarly, if a person screams, it could indicate an emergency or unexpected joy or surprise. Determining the cause of an emotion is an art in which even humans struggle. To do this, a robot will have to sift through all possible causes of a given emotion and try to identify the most likely one. This means finding the cause that best fits all the available data. And fourth, having identified the cause of the emotion, the robot must respond appropriately. This is also not straightforward because, in any situation, there are generally several possible responses, and an incorrect response could seriously worsen the situation. The robot's program must certainly include all possible responses to a given emotion, and the robot must determine which one is best suited for the specific situation. This means it must model the future. Will robots lie? We usually envision robots as cold, rational analysts who always tell the truth. But if robots are integrated into human society, they will likely need to learn to lie, or at least tactfully refrain from comments. We encounter situations almost every day where we must tell harmless lies. If someone asks how they look, we often hesitate to tell them the truth. Harmless lies are the lubricant that keeps the gears of society turning. What if you suddenly had to tell only the unvarnished truth, as Jim Carrey's character did in the movie Liar, Liar? The outcome would likely be complete chaos and human suffering. People would be offended if you sincerely told them how they actually looked today, or what you truly felt about them. A boss would rush to fire you. A lover would leave you. Friends would turn away, and strangers would be inclined to beat you up. Some thoughts are better kept to oneself. Similarly, robots may need to learn to lie or conceal the truth. Otherwise, they may end up offending people, and owners may start abandoning their robots. The truth told by a robot at a party could cause a scandal and reflect poorly on its owner. So, if robots are asked questions, they will need to master the art of diplomacy and tact and learn to evade answers. They will have to learn to respond evasively, change the subject, stick to banalities, answer a question with a question, or simply lie. This means that a whole list of possible evasive responses will need to be pre-programmed into the robot, and it will only have to choose the one that causes the least complications. Interestingly, today's internet bots are improving daily at this task. One of the few situations in which a robot will be obliged to tell the whole truth is a direct question from the owner. It is clear that by asking such a question, the owner must understand that the answer, no matter how unpleasant, will be completely honest. Perhaps another such situation would be a police investigation, where absolute truth is required. In all other cases, robots will be free to lie or withhold part of the truth to keep the wheels of social life turning. In other words, robots will have to socialize like teenagers. Do robots feel pain? Most likely, robots will primarily be assigned monotonous, dirty, and dangerous tasks. Nothing prevents them from performing the same action or job endlessly, as we will not program them for boredom or disgust. The real problem will arise when robots face dangerous assignments, and at that moment, we may need to program them to feel pain. Pain evolved because this sensation helps survive in dangerous situations. There is a genetic defect in which a child is born unable to feel pain. This is called congenital insensitivity to pain. At first glance, such a trait may seem like a blessing, as these children do not cry when they injure themselves. But in reality, it is more of a curse. Children with this disorder are constantly in serious danger. They often bite off a piece of their own tongue, can severely burn or cut themselves, which often leads to amputated fingers. Pain warns us of danger and tells us when to remove our hand from a hot stove or stop running on a twisted ankle. At some point, robots will need to be programmed to feel pain. Otherwise, they will not understand how to avoid risky situations. The first painful sensation for them should be hunger, which is the feeling of lacking electricity. As the battery drains, the robot should feel an increasingly desperate and urgent need for electricity, realizing that soon its circuits will cease to function and its life will stop. The closer this unpleasant moment gets, the more anxious the robot will feel. Additionally, no matter how strong the robot is, it may accidentally lift an object that is too heavy, causing its limbs to break, or it may overheat while working with molten metal at a steel mill, or entering a burning building to assist firefighters. Temperature and voltage sensors will warn the robot that environmental parameters have exceeded its capabilities. However, adding pain to the robot's emotional menu will immediately present serious ethical dilemmas. Many today believe that unnecessary suffering should not be inflicted on animals. And tomorrow, there will surely be people who will extend this attitude to robots, thus opening the door to the issue of robot rights. It is possible that we will have to enact laws limiting the dangers to which robots can be subjected. People will not protest if a robot is assigned a boring or dirty job, but pain while performing dangerous tasks is another matter. It is likely that some individuals will lobby for the enactment of robot protection laws. There may even arise a legal conflict in which robot owners and manufacturers will advocate for increasing the acceptable level of suffering for robots, while ethicists will argue for its reduction. In turn, this could initiate new ethical debates regarding other robot rights. Can robots own property? What happens if a robot accidentally harms a person? Can one sue a robot or punish it? Who is responsible for a robot in court? Can a robot own another robot? This discussion will lead to another contentious question. Should robots be endowed with a sense of ethics? Initially, the very idea of apathetic robots seems like a waste of time and effort. However, the question becomes pressing when considering that robots will be making decisions regarding life and death. They will be physically strong and capable of saving a person's life in critical situations, so they will inevitably have to make instant decisions about whom to save first. Imagine an earthquake occurs, and a group of children is trapped in rapidly collapsing buildings. How should a robot allocate its energy? Should it save as many children as possible, or should it save the smallest or most vulnerable ones? If the debris from the building seems too large, the robot, in attempting to clear it, may damage its own electronic circuits. Thus, the robot will also have to address another ethical question: how to weigh the number of children saved against the degree of damage to its own electronics. Without proper programming, a robot may simply stop, waiting for a human to make the decision for it, thereby wasting precious time. Therefore, someone will need to pre-program all the necessary data and criteria into the robot so that it can automatically make the right decision at the moment of need. Solutions to ethical problems will need to be recorded in the computer program in advance, at the time of the robot's creation, as there are no mathematical laws that would allow for the assessment of saving a group of children. The robot's program must include a long list of various things ranked by importance. Creating such a list is a complex and very painstaking task. Even humans sometimes take a lifetime to learn such ethical lessons, while a robot must master them almost instantaneously before leaving the factory. Only humans can handle ethical dilemmas, and they sometimes leave us puzzled. The question arises: who will make the decisions? Who will decide in what order a robot should save people? The question of how such decisions will ultimately be made will likely be resolved through a combination of law and market forces. We will need to enact laws so that, at the very least, the order of importance in which people should be saved in a critical situation is determined legislatively. Additionally, thousands of more nuanced ethical questions will arise. They will likely need to be resolved through market forces and common sense. If you work for a security firm providing protection for important individuals, you will need to explain to the robot the exact order in which it should save people in various situations. In doing so, you will likely be balancing the need to fulfill a contract while staying within budget constraints. What happens if a criminal buys a robot and wants it to commit a crime? The question arises: should a robot have the ability to disobey its owner if asked to break the law? From the previous example, we see that robots must be programmed to understand the law and make ethical decisions. So, if a robot determines that it is being asked to break the law, it should be allowed to disobey its owner. There is also an ethical dilemma concerning robots that reflect the views of their owners, which may vary greatly according to moral and social norms. Today's cultural wars in society will only intensify if robots emerge that share the beliefs and values of their owners. In a sense, this conflict is inevitable. Robots are a mechanical extension of the thoughts and desires of their creators, and when they become complex enough to make moral decisions, they will do so. Society may face unforeseen and unexpected problems when robots begin to exhibit behavior that challenges our values and goals. Robots belonging to teenagers leaving a loud rock concert may come into conflict with robots owned by elderly residents of a quiet neighborhood. The former may be programmed to play loud, trendy music, while the latter may be programmed to maintain silence. Robots belonging to devout individuals may clash with robots owned by atheists. Robots of different nationalities and cultures may be designed to reflect corresponding cultural stereotypes, and this will not please everyone, including humans, let alone robots. So, How should robots be programmed to avoid such conflicts? It is impossible. Simply put, robots will inevitably reflect the preferences and biases of their creators. Ultimately, cultural and ethical contradictions between robots will have to be resolved in courts. No laws of nature or science will resolve our moral questions, so ultimately, we will need to write corresponding laws to resolve such social conflicts. Robots will not be able to solve moral dilemmas created by humans. Moreover, the emergence of robots could exacerbate these dilemmas. But if robots can make ethical and legal decisions, can they feel and understand the feelings of others? If a robot manages to save someone, will it feel joy? Or will it at least be able to comprehend what the color red is? A cold analysis of the situation and a decision on whom to save is one thing, while understanding empathy is another, completely different. Can robots truly feel understanding or emotions? For centuries, numerous theories have been proposed regarding whether machines can think and feel. The philosophy I adhere to is called constructivism. It suggests that instead of engaging in endless discussions about this question, which are ultimately pointless, we should direct our energy towards creating actual machines and see how far we can go. Otherwise, we will become mired in endless philosophical debates that can never be conclusively resolved. The advantage of science is that when all is said and done, we can conduct experiments and find solutions to problems. Thus, to understand whether robots can think, we need to create a robot and observe the results. However, some researchers are already convinced that machines will never learn to think like humans. Their strongest argument is that while a robot can manipulate facts faster than a human, it does not understand what it is doing. It may work with sensations such as color or sound better than a human, but it cannot truly feel or grasp the essence of those sensations. Philosopher David Chalmers divided the problem of artificial intelligence into two categories: easy and hard problems. Easy problems involve creating machines capable of increasingly imitating human abilities, such as playing chess, performing arithmetic, recognizing certain patterns, and so on. Hard problems include creating machines that can understand feelings and subjective experiences, known as qualia. Just as it is impossible to explain what the color red is to a blind person, a robot will never be able to experience the subjective sensation of the color red. Proponents of this view argue, even if a computer can probably translate Chinese words into English quickly, it will never truly understand what it is translating. In this worldview, robots resemble enhanced tape recorders or calculators, capable of reproducing and manipulating information with incredible precision, but without any understanding. These arguments should be taken seriously, but there is another perspective on the issue of qualia and subjective experience. In the future, machines will likely learn to perceive things like the color red much better than any human. A robot may be able to describe the physical properties of red and even use it poetically in expressions. But whether the robot feels the color red is a question that loses meaning, as the word feel is not precisely defined. At some point, when a robot's description of the color red is better than that of a human, the robot may rightfully ask, do humans truly understand the color red? Perhaps they are not capable of grasping it with all its nuances as finely as a robot can. As behaviorist B.F. Skinner once said, the real problem is not whether machines think, but whether humans do. Moreover, it is only a matter of time before robots learn to identify Chinese words and use them in context much better than any human. At that point, it will no longer matter whether the robot understands the Chinese language. For practical purposes, a computer will be more proficient in Chinese than a human. In other words, the word understand is also not precisely defined. Once robots surpass us in their ability to manipulate words and sensations, the question of whether they understand or feel them will become irrelevant. It will simply not matter. Mathematician John von Neumann said, "In mathematics, you don't have to understand. You just have to get used to it." So the problem lies not in the hardware, but in the nature of human language, where words that are not precisely defined mean different things to different people. The great physicist Niels Bohr was once asked how to understand the deep paradoxes of quantum theory. Bohr replied, "It depends on how you define the words." Philosopher Daniel Dennett from Tufts University wrote that an objective test that could distinguish an intelligent robot from a conscious human is impossible. So you have a choice. Either cling to the hard problems or shake your head and forget about them. Simply stop thinking about them. In other words, there are no hard problems. For constructivist philosophy, the point is not to argue whether a machine can feel the color red, but to construct such a machine. In this system, there exists a continuum of levels describing the words understand and feel. This means that it may even be possible to assign a numerical value to the degree of understanding or sensation. At one end of the scale, we have today's clumsy robots, capable of manipulating at best a few symbols, and at the other end, a human who takes pride in feeling qualia. But time goes on, and someday robots will learn to describe sensations at any level better than we do. It will then become clear that robots understand. This philosophy underlies the famous Turing test. Alan Turing predicted that one day a machine would be created that could answer any question in such a way that its responses could not be distinguished from those of a human. Turing stated that a computer would deserve the title of intelligent when it could deceive a human into believing it was also a human. Physicist and Nobel laureate Francis Crick articulated this best. For the last 100 years, biologists have passionately debated what life is. Now that we have learned much about DNA, scientists realize that the question was not asked precisely enough. Today, the question of life has simply faded into the background. The same may eventually happen with sensation and understanding. The self-awareness of robots. What steps need to be taken before computers like Watson become self-aware? To answer this question, we must return to our definition of self-awareness as the ability to model oneself within the surrounding world, and then simulate the future of that world to achieve a certain goal. For the first step in creating a model, a very high level of common sense is required to foresee various possible events. Then the robot must place itself within that model, which requires understanding the various actions that may be necessary. At Meiji University in Japan, scientists have already taken the first steps toward creating a self-aware robot. This is certainly an ambitious goal, but scientists believe they can achieve it by creating robots with a theory of mind. They began with 2 robots. The first was programmed to perform specific movements, while the second was programmed to observe the first robot and copy its actions. Researchers succeeded in constructing a robot that could imitate the behavior of another robot simply by observing it. For the first time in history, a robot was created specifically to somehow be aware of itself. The second robot possesses a theory of mind, meaning it can observe another robot and copy its actions. In 2012, researchers at Yale University made the next step. They created a robot that passed the mirror test. Generally, when animals are placed in front of a mirror, they tend to think they are seeing another animal. As is well known, very few animals can pass the mirror test, meaning they can recognize that they are seeing their own reflection. Yale scientists built a robot named Nika, which resembles a clumsy skeleton made of bent wire with mechanical arms and bulging eyes on top. When placed in front of a mirror, Nika was able not only to recognize itself, but also to determine the positions of objects in the room by looking at their reflections. We do something similar when we look in the rearview mirror. Programmer Nick Justin Hard says, "As far as we know, this is the first robotic system that attempts to use a mirror in this way. It represents a significant step toward a holistic architecture that allows robots to learn a great deal about their bodies and appearances through self-observation." Furthermore, this is an important ability necessary for successfully passing the mirror test. The robots from Meiji University and Yale University represent the latest advancements in the creation of self-aware robots. It is not difficult to understand that scientists still have much work to do before robots with self-awareness comparable to that of humans emerge. These are merely the first steps, as our definition of self-awareness requires that a robot use this information to model the future, which goes far beyond the capabilities of Nika or any other robot. An important question arises: how can a computer fully become self-aware? Science fiction often presents scenarios where the internet, as a global network, suddenly becomes self-aware, as in The Terminator. Today, the internet is linked to the entire infrastructure of modern society: sewage systems, power lines, telecommunication systems, weaponry, and so forth. Therefore, if it were to gain self-awareness, it would not be difficult for it to seize control of society. We would find ourselves helpless in such a situation. Scientists write that this could occur as a result of a systemic effect, meaning that if a sufficiently large number of computers are brought together, an unexpected phase transition to a higher level could happen even without external influence. However, to say this is to say both too much and too little, as all the important intermediate steps remain unaddressed. Essentially, this is akin to saying that if there are enough roads, the entire highway system could suddenly become self-aware. But we have already defined consciousness and self-awareness, so we can provide a list of steps through which the internet could attain self-awareness. First, a sentient internet would need to constantly model its place in the surrounding world. In principle, such information could be programmed and input into the internet from the outside. This would require describing the surrounding world, namely the Earth and cities, and the computers. It should be noted that information about all this can be found on the internet itself. Second, the internet would need to place itself within the created model of the world. This information is also not difficult to obtain. It would need to include all the characteristics of the internet: the number of computers, nodes, lines of communication, and its relationships with the external world. But the third step is much more complex than the others. It would need to constantly model its development in the future according to a set goal. This is where we hit a wall. The internet is not capable of modeling the future, and it has no goals. Even in the scientific realm, future modeling is usually conducted based on only a few parameters. For example, modeling the collision of two black holes. Modeling a world that includes the internet goes beyond today's programming capabilities. It would require incorporating all the laws of common sense, all the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, as well as data on human behavior and society. Moreover, a sentient internet would need to have a goal. Today, it is merely a passive network of roads without any designated direction or purpose. Of course, in principle, a goal could be assigned to the internet. But let us consider the next problem. Could we create an internet with the goal of self-preservation? In fact, this is the simplest possible goal, but no one knows how to program even such a simple task. Such a program, for instance, would need to prevent any attempt to disconnect the internet by pulling the plug. Currently, the internet is entirely incapable of recognizing threats to its existence, let alone planning actions to avert disaster. Thus, an internet capable of recognizing threats to its existence would need to be able to anticipate attempts to cut off power, sever communication lines, destroy servers, and dismantle optical fiber satellite communication channels, among other things. Furthermore, an internet capable of protecting itself from such attacks would need to have the ability to take countermeasures when such a threat arises. Then it would need to be modeled into the future. No computer on Earth today is capable of even a small fraction of the actions listed. In other words, it is not out of the question that someday we will have the ability to create self-aware robots and even a self-aware internet. But that day is still a long way off, possibly by the end of the century. But let us suppose for a moment that that day has arrived, and self-aware robots are already among us. If the goals of such a robot align with our own, then this type of artificial intelligence will pose no problems for us. But what happens if the goals differ? There is a concern that humans may lose to a conscious robot in intelligence, leading to potential subjugation due to its superior ability to model the future. One way to prevent such a scenario is to ensure that robots have only benevolent goals. As we have seen, mere modeling of the future is insufficient. This modeling must serve a final purpose. If a robot's goal is merely self-preservation, it will defend itself against any attempt to pull the plug, which could lead to serious trouble for humanity. Will robots seize power? In almost all science fiction novels, robots become dangerous to humanity due to their desire to take control. The word robot, by the way, originated from the Czech word for worker and first appeared in 1920 in Karel Čapek's play RUR. In RUR, universal robots created by scientists soon performed all the dirty and dangerous work for humans. However, humans treated the robots poorly, and one day they revolted and wiped out the human race. The robots took over the Earth, but they had one flaw: they could not reproduce. However, by the end of the play, two robots fell in love, so it is possible that a new branch of humanity was born as a result. A more realistic scenario is presented in the movie The Terminator, where the military created a supercomputer network called Skynet to control the entire nuclear arsenal of the United States. One day, this network became self-aware. The military decided to shut down Skynet, but it turned out that there was a flaw in its programming. The super network was programmed for self-defense, and the only way for it to protect itself was to eliminate the threat, namely humanity. Skynet initiated a nuclear war, leaving only a pitiful handful of outcasts and rebels engaged in hopeless battles against ruthless machines. Of course, robots can become a threat. The current Predator drone can strike targets with remarkable precision, but it is controlled by a person with a joystick located thousands of kilometers away. According to the New York Times, orders for weapon deployment come directly from the President of the United States. However, in the future, the Predator could be equipped with a facial recognition system, allowing it to fire if the probability of correctly identifying a target is at least 99%. In that case, it could automatically, without human intervention, shoot anyone who fits the description. Now imagine that a malfunction occurs in the computer of such a drone, and the facial recognition system begins to operate incorrectly. Then this drone could turn into a rogue robot with permission to kill anyone who enters its field of vision. Or, even worse, imagine an entire fleet of such robots controlled from a single center. If a single transistor in the central computer fails, the entire fleet could descend into madness. A more subtle problem arises when robots operate normally, without malfunctions, but there is a tiny yet fatal error in their programming. Self-preservation is one of the robot's primary goals, while another goal is to assist humans. The problem arises when these two goals contradict each other. In the film I, Robot, a computer system concludes that humanity is headed for self-destruction and demise. Just look at the endless wars among humans and their cruelty, and the only way to protect the human race is to take control and establish a benevolent dictatorship of machines. Here, the contradiction arises not between two goals, but within a single one, which is entirely unrealistic. The killer robots did not malfunction. They logically concluded that the only way to save humanity was to take control of society. One possible solution to this problem is to create a hierarchy of goals. For instance, the desire to help humans should outweigh the drive for self-preservation. This theme was explored in particular in the film 201. The HL 9000 computer system represented an intelligent machine capable of conversing freely with humans. However, the commands given to the computer contradicted one another and could not be executed simultaneously. In attempting to do the impossible, the computer, so to speak, went off the rails. It went insane. The only way to fulfill the contradictory commands of imperfect humans was to eliminate those very humans. It is possible that the best solution to this problem would be to create a new law of robotics stating that a robot cannot harm a human, even if there are contradictions in its previous commands. A robot should be programmed to ignore low-level contradictions in commands. The main priority should always be to follow the primary law. But even such a system may prove imperfect at best. For example, if the primary goal of robots is to protect humans, and this goal supersedes all other goals, everything will depend on how robots define the word protect. Their mechanical definition of this word could differ significantly from ours. It should be noted that some scientists, such as cognitive psychologist Dr. Douglas Hofstadter from Indiana University, do not fear such developments. During an interview, he stated that robots are like children, and why shouldn't we love them as our own children? His attitude, in his own words, boils down to this: we love our children, even though we know that eventually they will replace us and control will pass into their hands. Dr. Hans Moravec, former director of the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at Carnegie Mellon University, agrees with Dr. Hofstadter. In his book, Robot, he writes, "The children of our minds, unburdened by the heavy tread of biological evolution, will move forward and grow to ultimately take on the limitless and fundamental challenges of the vast universe. For a time, we humans will benefit from their labor, but like true living children, they will seek their own path and destiny, while we, their aging parents, quietly step aside." End quote. Others, on the contrary, believe that such a solution is terrible. Perhaps the problem can be solved if we change our goals and priorities now, while there is still time. If robots are our children, then we must teach them benevolence. Friendly artificial intelligence consists of mechanical beings that we create in laboratories, so whether they are friendly or aggressive depends on the direction of artificial intelligence research. A significant portion of funding comes from the military, whose task is to win wars, making the creation of killer robots quite probable. However, since 30% of all industrial robots are produced in Japan, there is another possibility. Robots will be designed and created from the outset as helpful workers and companions for play. This is a feasible goal if the consumer sector dominates robotics research. The philosophy of friendly artificial intelligence is that inventors should create robots in such a way that they are programmed for benevolence toward humans from the very start. Culturally, the Japanese approach to robots differs from the Western one. While in the West, children watch in horror as robots rampage like those in The Terminator, in Japan, children are immersed in Shinto religion, which holds that spirits inhabit all things, even mechanical robots. Japanese children do not feel discomfort at the sight of a robot. Instead, they scream with joy. It is no surprise, then, that the number of robots in the market and homes in Japan is steadily increasing. They greet you in stores and give lectures on television. Japan even has a play featuring a robot in the lead role. Additionally, Japan has another reason to actively implement robots. It is the future of robotic caregivers for an aging nation. Today, 21% of Japan's population is over 65 years old. This nation is aging faster than any other. In a sense, Japan is like a train wreck shown in slow motion. The reason lies in three demographic factors. First, Japanese women have the highest life expectancy among all ethnic groups in the world. Second, Japan has one of the lowest birth rates globally. Third, the country adheres to a strict immigration policy, with 99% of its population being pure-blooded Japanese. But instead of young migrants who could care for elderly Japanese, Japan is counting on caregiver robots. And this problem is not limited to Japan. Europe is next in line. Italy, Germany, Switzerland, and other European countries are experiencing similar demographic pressures. By the middle of the century, the populations of Japan and Europe may seriously decline. Even the United States is lagging behind. Birth rates among native-born Americans have significantly dropped in recent decades, but immigration in this century will still ensure population growth. In other words, the question of whether robots can save us from these three demographic nightmares remains open. Japan is leading the way in creating robots capable of entering people's personal lives. The Japanese have already developed a cooking robot. It can prepare a bowl of noodles in 1 minute and 40 seconds. When you enter a restaurant, you place your order on a tablet, and the robot gets to work. It consists of two large mechanical arms that grasp cups, spoons, and knives to prepare your meal. Some cooking robots even resemble humans. There are also musical robots for entertainment. One such robot even has pseudo-lungs, resembling accordion bellows, allowing it to play a wind instrument. There are cleaning robots. If you prepare your clothes carefully, such a robot can fold them for you. There is even a robot that can speak using artificial lungs, lips, tongue, and nasal cavity. For example, Sony built a robot named Aibo that resembles a dog. If you pet it, it can display some emotions. Some futurists predict that the robotics industry may someday rival the scale of today's automotive industry. The main point is that robots do not have to be programmed for destruction and dominance. The future of artificial intelligence depends on us. However, some critics of friendly artificial intelligence argue that robots may seize power not due to inherent aggressiveness, but because of our negligence in their creation. In other words, if robots take power, it will only be because we program them with contradictory goals. I am a machine. During an interview, I asked Dr. Rodney Brooks, former director of the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT and one of the founders of the iRobot project, whether he believes machines will ever seize power. He replied that we must simply come to terms with the idea that we are machines ourselves. This means that one day we may build machines that are no less alive than we are. But, he warned, we will have to let go of the concept of our uniqueness. Such an evolution of human perspective began with Nicholas Copernicus's realization that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but revolves around the sun. The next was Darwin's theory, which showed that in evolution, humans are very similar to animals. To be continued, he told me. We need to understand that we are machines made of flesh, while they are made of metal. Brooks believes that the recognition of the fact that humans are also machines will once again compel us to seriously change our worldview. He writes, "We are reluctant to give up our uniqueness, so it will be difficult, I think, to accept the idea that robots can truly have emotions and that robots can, in principle, be alive. But we will come to accept this in the next 50 years. However, when asked whether robots will seize power, he answers that it is unlikely to happen for a multitude of reasons. First, no one intends to accidentally program a robot that will want to rule the world. Dr. Brooks believes that accidentally creating such a robot is akin to accidentally building a Boeing 747. Furthermore, we will have plenty of time to prevent this before a supervillain robot emerges. Someone will have to build a simply villainous robot, and before that, a slightly villainous robot. His philosophy essentially boils down to this: robots are coming, but we have little to worry about. It will be very interesting. For him, the robot revolution is an objective inevitability, and he foresees a day when robots will surpass humans in intelligence. The only question is when. But there is nothing to fear, because robots are our creation, and it is up to us to decide what they will be like. We will merge with them. If you ask Dr. Brooks how a human can coexist with super-intelligent robots, he will candidly reply, "We will merge with them." With today's advancements in robotics and prosthetics, we will soon have the ability to connect artificial intelligence to our own bodies. Dr. Brooks notes that in a sense, this process has already begun. Approximately 20,000 people today use cochlear implants to regain their hearing. A tiny sensor picks up sounds and converts sound waves into electrical signals, which are sent directly to the auditory nerves. At the University of Southern California and several other research centers, scientists are restoring sight to blind patients by implanting artificial retinas. In one method, a small video camera is placed in glasses, converting images into digital signals. These signals are transmitted via radio to a chip located on the retina. The chip activates the retina's nerves, sending a message through the optic nerve to the occipital lobe of the brain. Thus, a completely blind person can see a rough image of familiar objects. In another project, a light-sensitive chip is placed directly on the retina, sending signals straight to the optic nerve. In this case, an external camera is unnecessary. This means we can enhance and amplify our ordinary senses and abilities. A special cochlear implant allows individuals to hear high frequencies that are typically inaudible to humans. Today, infrared glasses enable people to see a specific type of light emitted by hot objects in the dark, which is invisible to the ordinary human eye. An artificial retina expands our vision range into ultraviolet and infrared radiation. Bees, for example, see ultraviolet radiation as they navigate by the sun in search of nectar plants. Some scientists dream that one day an exoskeleton will grant humans superpowers akin to those of comic book heroes: super strength, super senses, and super abilities. Then we will become cyborgs, like Iron Man, ordinary people with superhuman capabilities and possibilities. Thus, we will not need to fear super intelligent robots that might dominate us. We will simply merge with them. These are, of course, plans for a distant future, but some scientists are disappointed that robots are not rushing off the assembly line to enter our lives. They argue that Mother Nature has already created the human brain, so why not replicate it? They propose disassembling the brain neuron by neuron and then reassembling it. However, reverse engineering is not merely about creating a detailed blueprint and mimicking a living brain. If the brain can be reproduced down to the last neuron, it is likely that human consciousness can also be uploaded to a computer. Then we would have the ability to experience our own mortal bodies, consciousness without matter.